How's it going, folks? Continuing my audio myths series. Sorry I missed last week, lots going on. Anyway, analog versus digital. Really, there is no bigger debate in the studio world. Does it matter though? Well, I happen to think that this transcends the purely sonic qualities of the different ways of working, but I want to know what you think. So drop me a comment right now. Let me know what you think of the analog versus digital debate. And then when you've watched this video, maybe comment on that comment and see if what I've said makes sense and if it's changed your opinion on things. Let's go. I've recently taken on a new desk in the studio. It's over there. Instantly, when other engineers see a desk in the studio, their mind is going to be drawn to a couple of different places. They're going to say, wow, how does it sound? Or that certain amount of gear snobbery is going to come into play, and they'll think, yeah, but it's not Neve though, is it? I definitely do both these things, and long have I dreamt about having a vintage Neve console in my studio to put all my mixes through and have it instantly make my song a hit. But for me, that's really not what it's about. It's about workflow. Let me explain. Now, I've worked on a vintage Neve for a number of sessions. I didn't use it and think, oh my God, this sounds amazing, because I had no real frame of reference. It wasn't an A/B test against a lesser desk and noting down the differences. It wasn't about that. In fact, there were two things that occurred to me when using that Neve desk, one of which still occurs to me whenever I go into a studio and use a desk. The first thing that occurred to me was, wow, these pots are scratchy. Wow, that doesn't work like it should do. Or wow, I wish that LED actually worked. Because the bottom line is, no matter how good your tech is, they're not going to take an 80-channel desk apart to fix one LED. It's just not practical. They're going to wait until there are enough problems to necessitate putting that studio out of action for a day or two until the problems are solved. But the thing that occurred to me, and the thing that stuck with me about recording on a desk is, wow, this is so easy tracking a full band on a desk. Everything is right here in front of me. This has never really left me and is really the reason I chose to bring a desk into the studio. Even digital desks, there's a certain amount of menu diving involved, and in my mind, for live sound, digital desks are absolutely amazing and make everything so much quicker and easier. But in the studio, I don't actually want to be able to recall those settings that I had for that last band that was in, because the amps are different, the drummer has got more toms maybe, a different snare, the singer's got a totally different voice. In the studio, it's far more tailored to the band. Often in live sound, unless you're a massive band touring with your own tech, it's just about getting the job done. So to get the full band tracked through the desk, it's a far bigger setup. I have the mics, which go into the channels, out the direct outs, through some cables, through a patch bay, through some more cables, into some line inputs, through an ADAT cable into my interface. Now, nobody can say that that's a pure signal path, let alone a pure analog signal path. There's too many moving parts there and so many levels of complication. When I have a session where I'm just recording a vocalist, I don't even turn the desk on. There's no point. I just go straight from the mic into my interface and run with that. Because this is the thing. I'm not using a desk because there's some magical warmth there. I'm using it because in full band tracking sessions, it's absolutely amazing for workflow and getting everything working right without having to make a billion clicks with my mouse to get everything routed right, get everything sent back to them. It's just a complete pain. I'm using an analog console because it's a hell of a lot easier to have everything laid out in front of me. So it's definitely horses for courses. And in the past, when I've been tracking bands with just an interface, it's always been fine and sounded good. But there's always that little niggle in the back of my mind that said, this is a bit of a pain. And that's the other side of the analog versus digital debate, isn't it? No matter how you look at it, including analog gear in your setup is going to be more work. It is going to make mix revisions longer, and it is going to give you more issues. Cables can break, valves can wear out, dry solder joints. There's so many more things that can go wrong in the analog world. In the digital world, it's not a perfect system. Things can go wrong, but just not in the same way. When I upgraded to an M1 chipped Mac a few years ago, I had the absolute pleasure of having to pay for some software for the second time, the same bit of software, just because it was silicon. Now, I get it to an extent. The company who makes the software had to put more hours into making it work on a silicon chip, but still it did kind of sting a little bit. In the analog world, you don't have that problem. Your 1176 compressor that you spent thousands on is probably going to work in more or less any studio in the world, as long as the DA converter or interface can actually shove audio out into the real world. I haven't updated my operating system or version of Logic in quite a long time now, and probably won't until I really have to, because it bloody well works. Resale value has got to be mentioned here as well. If you buy a vintage piece of analog equipment, the chances are you'll get back what you paid for it, if you ever decide to sell it, that is. Maybe it'll even appreciate in value, who knows. But that piece of digital hardware that you thought was going to be incredibly useful for your studio, well, it probably was incredible until someone made a software emulation that sounds 95% the same and gets rid of the hassle of taking audio out and back into the computer, latency cables, all that stuff. This isn't me bashing those that use analog gear in your studio to mix, not in any way. If that's your workflow, you should 100% carry on the way you feel comfortable. But it's disheartening to see younger engineers questioning their equipment because it's not analog enough, or because they're just working with a 2-channel interface into a laptop. I have a couple of pieces of what I think would fall into that digital hardware category. The Kemper profiling amp for a start. It sounds great and I love it. But honestly, I'm turning it on less and less these days because I have a load of software amp sims that sound absolutely excellent. Maybe it's just me wanting to have the DI in there so I can change the sound after, something that we're always told is bad, to not commit to a sound. Whether or not you should record a DI along with your guitar part is a story for another day though. But in short, yeah, do it. The amount of times it will save you will outweigh the time it took to set the box up. But I digress. Analog is a weird and wonderful world where you're told that your piece of analog gear is not as good as the next person's because it's not as expensive. Software doesn't really have that issue, does it? Long gone are the days when I would feel like people looked down their noses at me because I was only using Pro Tools LE and couldn't afford the full HD rig. But look where those HD rigs are now. Digital hardware being sold for 1/10 what the guy paid for it, whilst the aforementioned 1176 that cost about the same is still worth as much, if not more. So analog, is it great? Well, yeah, it is. It's fun. But what's more important is that for some workflows, like when I'm recording a band, I really don't think you can beat it. Just for mixing alone, I'm going to stick to my DAW and save the money for something other than hardware. Maybe in the future, I'll get a sexy piece of outboard gear and instantly delete this video because I realise how amazing it is. Well, yeah, maybe. But if you were born into the analog world and love it, stick with it. Go crazy. If you were born into the digital world and strive to move into the analog world because you think somehow it legitimizes your career, maybe it's not actually what you need. I'd love to know what you think about it. So drop me a comment and I'll see you again soon. Take care.